Victoria Reynolds woke up with a strange feeling of lightness, as if yesterday had been a dream. The snow-white dress still hung on the chair, and 2 wedding rings lay on the nightstand. Hers and Owen's. No, not a dream. Reality. She was married, 30 years old, successful business, a stake in a major company inherited from her father, and now a family. Everything she'd been dreaming about for years. Owen was already awake. He stood by the bedroom window of their downtown Chicago apartment, talking on the phone in a hushed voice. But when he noticed Victoria had opened her eyes, he quickly ended the conversation. "Good morning, wife." He smiled, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How did you sleep?" "Wonderfully," she answered, stretching. "Who are you talking to?" "A colleague. Work stuff before vacation." Owen waved his hand dismissively. "Forget it. Today we finish packing. And tomorrow we fly to Miami. 2 weeks just for the two of us." Victoria smiled. Owen Sullivan had appeared in her life 6 months ago at a business dinner. Tall, athletic, with bottomless dark eyes and charm that won you over from the first minutes. He worked in investment, talked about projects, travels, about how important it was to find someone you'd want to share not only joy with, but difficulties, too. Victoria fell in love quickly, almost instantly. Owen was attentive, caring, brought flowers for no reason, and knew how to listen. He seemed to know exactly what she needed to hear. True, sometimes Victoria noticed oddities when she asked about his past, his family, previous relationships. Owen answered evasively. He said the past was a closed book, that only the future mattered. Once she tried to insist, and then something hard, almost cold, flashed in his eyes. Owen abruptly cut off the conversation, saying he didn't want to stir up painful memories. Victoria decided not to press. Everyone has a right to secrets. She decided then. They had breakfast together, croissants, fresh squeezed juice, coffee. Owen was cheerful, joking, making plans for their honeymoon. Victoria looked at him and thought she'd made the right choice. This man would become the father of her children, her support, her life partner. "Shall we start packing our suitcases?" Owen suggested, finishing his coffee. "I'll gather my things. You gather yours." "Deal." Victoria nodded. She went to the walk-in closet, began sorting through summer dresses, swimsuits, shoes. Her mood was upbeat. Tomorrow they'd fly south, walk along the waterfront, swim in the ocean, dine by candlelight. The romance that had been so lacking in recent years, when her whole life revolved around business and negotiations. Her phone vibrated unexpectedly. Victoria glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Usually she didn't answer such calls, but for some reason she picked up now. "Victoria Reynolds," came a woman's voice. Quiet, tense. "Yes, speaking. This is the Cook County Marriage License Bureau. Yesterday, you registered your marriage with Owen Sullivan." "That's correct." Victoria was surprised. Why would they be calling from the Marriage Bureau the day after the ceremony? "You see," the woman's voice became even quieter, almost a whisper. "We double-checked your spouse's documents as part of standard procedure, and we discovered a discrepancy, a serious discrepancy." "What discrepancy?" Victoria's heart began beating faster. "You'd better come see us in person. You need to see this with your own eyes." The woman paused. "And please come alone. Don't tell your husband at all. This is very important." "But what happened?" Victoria asked, confused. "I can't say over the phone. Come as soon as possible. I'll be waiting for you in the records department, 3rd floor. My name is Linda Foster." Dial tone. The woman had hung up. Victoria stood in the middle of the closet with the phone in her hand, trying to process what she'd heard. A discrepancy in the documents. What could that mean? An error in spelling his name. a problem with his passport. But then why couldn't she tell Owen? Why all this secrecy? Vic, how are you doing in there? Came her husband's voice from the living room. Found what you need? Yes, everything's fine, she called out, trying to make her voice sound calm. Just need a little more time. She quickly dressed in jeans and a light blouse, grabbed her purse. She needed to get to the marriage bureau urgently and find out what was going on. The anxiety wouldn't leave her, and she needed to close all questions before departure. Owen, I need to step out for a bit, Victoria said, coming into the living room. A friend called. She has an emergency. I'll help and be right back. Owen looked up from his phone. Something wary flashed in his eyes, but he quickly smiled. Of course. Honey, just don't be long. Okay, we still have a ton to do. I promise. Victoria kissed his cheek and left the apartment. The trip to the marriage bureau took 20 minutes. Victoria rode in a taxi and tried to calm down. Probably just some bureaucratic detail that could be easily fixed. Maybe they forgot to put a stamp or entered the data incorrectly in the registry. Linda Foster met her at the door of the records department, a heavy-set woman, about 55 with a worried look. She looked Victoria over with an expression of sympathy and sighed. Please, come in. She led Victoria into a small office. Close the door. Have a seat. Victoria sat in a chair in front of a desk piled with folders and documents. Linda Foster settled across from her, pulled several printed sheets from the desk drawer. Victoria, what I'm about to show you will be a shock, she began quietly. Yesterday, after the ceremony, we sent the data to the Unified Civil Registry, as required, and we received an automatic notification of a discrepancy. Owen Sullivan is already married. Victoria froze. The words seemed stuck somewhere on the way to her consciousness. What? She exhaled. That's impossible. He's not married. He told me he'd never had a serious relationship before me. Linda Foster placed a printout in front of her. Here's a record from the archive. 15 years ago, Owen Sullivan registered a marriage with Margaret Brennan. There was no record of dissolution of this marriage in the database. Victoria grabbed the sheet with trembling hands. There really were printed data, names, dates of birth, passport numbers, date of marriage, registration 15 years ago. But how? How did you not notice this earlier? Victoria whispered. At that time, we checked the passport your spouse provided. Linda Foster explained. There was no notation of marriage in it. And today, when the data went into the registry, the system automatically detected a discrepancy. I pulled up the archive and found out the following. 6 months ago, Owen Sullivan went to the passport office with a statement about losing his passport. They issued him a new one. He didn't report that he was married, and information about Margaret wasn't transferred to the new document. So, he hid that he was married. Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. Formally, yes, but legally, this has consequences. Linda Foster spoke carefully, choosing her words. Your marriage yesterday is null and void according to Illinois law. You cannot enter into marriage if one of the spouses is already in another registered marriage. Victoria felt the room swim before her eyes. She wasn't married. Yesterday's wedding, the white dress, the vows, the guests' congratulations, all of it was emptiness, a fiction. But where is this Margaret? Why didn't they get divorced? She asked, trying to keep her voice under control. I don't know that, Linda Foster answered, but there's something else. I checked the archive for this woman, Margaret Brennan, married name Sullivan, after registering marriage with your spouse. Her trail goes cold. There are no records, no divorce, no death, no change of residence, just emptiness. Victoria felt a chill crawling up her spine. Trail goes cold. 15 years ago, Owen never mentioned any Margaret. He never talked about his past at all, forbade questions, brushed them off, and sometimes that coldness appeared in his gaze, the kind that made you uneasy. What should I do now? Victoria whispered. Officially, your marriage will be annulled as soon as we complete the verification procedure. Linda Foster said, but I would advise you to be careful. If your spouse hid the fact of an existing marriage from you, he may have had reasons for it. Very serious reasons. Don't tell him you know. Don't show that something's wrong, and be vigilant. Victoria nodded, though her thoughts were confused. She stood, thanked the marriage bureau employee, and left the building. Outside, it was a warm spring day. The sun was shining, people were walking, laughing, and Victoria's world was collapsing. She got in a taxi and headed home. On the way, she tried to organize her thoughts. Owen hid that he was married. His first wife disappeared 15 years ago, without a trace. He never talked about the past, forbade asking questions, and now he married her heiress to a major business, a financially independent woman. Coincidence? Victoria remembered how Owen asked about her stake in the company, about finance, about accounts, said he wanted to know everything about her life, to protect her, help her be there for her. She trusted him, told him things, shared figures, documents, and now she understood. He was gathering information, preparing. 2 months ago, Owen suggested she grant him power of attorney to manage part of her assets, said if something happened to her, he could quickly make decisions, protect the business. Victoria then refused, citing that there were lawyers and partners who would manage perfectly well. Owen didn't insist, but she remembered the slight disappointment in his eyes. Now that moment took on new meaning. When Victoria returned home, Owen greeted her with a "So, how's your friend? Did you handle the emergency?" "Yes, everything's fine," Victoria answered, trying to smile. "Just a minor issue. Quickly resolved." "Great. Then let's finish packing. This time tomorrow will already be in Miami." Owen put his arm around her shoulders. Victoria nodded, but inside everything was clenching with fear. This man she loved, whom she trusted, turned out to be a stranger, unknown, dangerous. The rest of the day passed in strained ordinariness. They packed things, discussed routes, chose restaurants for future dinners. Owen was the embodiment of a caring husband, asked if she was tired, suggested she rest, massaged her shoulders. Victoria played the role of a happy wife, but now each of his touches caused revulsion. She looked at him and thought, what happened 15 years ago? Where is Margaret? That evening, when Owen went to shower, Victoria took out her phone and typed into the search engine, "Margaret Sullivan missing." Nothing. "Margaret Brennan missing." Nothing. Either she tried different combinations, but there were no results, as if this woman had never existed. At night, Victoria couldn't sleep. Owen slept beside her, breathing evenly and calmly. She lay with open eyes and tried to understand what to do next. Go to Miami and pretend nothing happened, or refuse the trip under some pretext. But then Owen would suspect something was wrong. Linda Foster warned, "Don't show that. You know. Be careful." The next morning they flew to Miami. On the plane, Owen held her hand, kissed her temple, made plans. Victoria smiled and nodded while panic grew inside. She was alone with a man who was possibly involved in his first wife's disappearance, alone in a strange city, far from friends and loved ones. At the hotel, they were greeted with champagne and fruit. The room was luxurious, windows within ocean view, a huge bed, a jacuzzi. Owen immediately suggested unpacking and heading to the beach. Victoria agreed, though all she wanted was to run away from here. She changed into a light dress and went out on the balcony. The ocean glittered under the sun. Waves rolled onto the shore. Beautiful. Peaceful. But this peace was deceptive. Vic, what are you thinking about? Owen appeared beside her, hugging her waist from behind. Something wrong? No. Everything's wonderful. She answered, trying to keep her voice from shaking. Just tired from the trip. Then rest. And I'll go down to the reception. Check. About excursions. Owen kissed her neck and left the room. As soon as the door closed, Victoria grabbed her phone. She needed help. She couldn't figure this out alone. She needed someone she trusted. Someone who had always been there. Simon Dalton. Childhood friend. They'd known each other since age 7. Studied together, grew up together. Simon had always been quiet, reliable, smart. Victoria knew he was in love with her, had known for many years. But she'd never reciprocated. Simon accepted it calmly, remained a friend, never pressured, never demanded, just was there. Victoria dialed his number. Simon answered after the second ring. Vic, hi, how's the honeymoon? Simon, I need your help. She blurted out, unable to hold back. Urgently, I don't know who else to turn to. What happened? Simon's voice immediately became serious. Owen. He hid from me that he's married 15 years ago and his wife disappeared. Without a trace. Simon. I'm scared. I don't know who he really is. Silence on the other end. Then Simon said quietly, where are you now? In Miami at the hotel. Listen to me carefully. Act natural. Don't show that you know. I'll find you. A private investigator. A good one. Let him figure out what happened 15 years ago when you hold on. And if you feel danger, call me immediately. Anytime. Understood? Yes. Victoria whispered. Thank you. I'll always be here. You know that. Simon said softly. She hung up and felt relief. Simon would help. He'd find someone who would uncover the truth. And she'd hold on. Had to hold on. Owen returned 10 minutes later with a map of excursions and a wide smile. Look at these options. A trip to the Everglades. Wine tasting. A yacht. Cruise. What should we choose? Let's decide tomorrow. Victoria suggested. Today. Let's just walk along the waterfront. Okay. Of course. Honey. Whatever you say. Owen hugged her and kissed her. Victoria looked at him and thought. How much lie is in this kiss? How many secrets does this gaze hide? And most importantly, how will this all end? The first 3 days in Miami, Victoria spent in constant tension. Owen was attentive, caring, romantic, exactly as she'd fallen in love with him. 6 months ago, they walked along the waterfront, dined in restaurants with ocean views, rode jet skis. Owen photographed her, kissed her, held her hand. The perfect honeymoon. The perfect lie. Victoria played her role flawlessly. She smiled, laughed at his jokes, let him embrace her, but inside, anxiety grew. Every time Owen touched her, she thought about the missing Margaret. Every time he suggested something, she analyzed. Why does he need this? What is he planning? On the 4th day in the morning, while Owen slept, Victoria went out on the balcony and called Simon. Vic, hi. He answered immediately. How are you? Holding on, she said quietly. Did you find an investigator? Yes. Derek Mason, former criminal, investigation operative, now in private practice, 20 years of experience, specializes in missing persons and complex cases. I already spoke with him, explained the situation. He's ready to take on the investigation. How much will it cost? He quoted 300,000 for a full investigation, plus expenses for expert analysis if needed. Vic, I can pay if you don't have the ability to. No, I'll do it myself. Victoria interrupted. I have the money. Give me his contact information. Simon dictated the phone number. Victoria wrote it down and immediately dialed. A man's voice answered after the third ring. Mason speaking. Mr. Mason, this is Victoria Reynolds. Simon Dalton gave me your contact. Information. Yes. He warned me. When can you meet to discuss details? I'm in Miami right now. I'll return to Chicago in 10 days. Too long. Mason said, if the situation is really serious. Time is working against us. Let's arrange everything remotely. I'll send you a contract by email. You sign through the app and transfer the advance. 50% now. The rest upon results. Agreed. Yes. Victoria glanced at the bedroom. Owen was still sleeping. Agreed. Good. I need all the information you have your husband's full name, date of birth, passport number, addresses where he lived 15 years ago, name of the missing wife, her data, everything you know. Victoria dictated everything she learned. From Linda Foster. Mason wrote, silently, occasionally, asking clarifying questions. Understood. He finally said, I'll start work today. I'll be in touch as information appears. Just one thing. If your husband suspects something, notify me immediately and be careful. Very careful. Okay, Victoria whispered. An hour later, the contract arrived in her email. She signed it with an electronic signature and transferred $150, 000, to the indicated account. The case had begun. The next days dragged on painfully. Slowly, Owen was still just as attentive and cheerful. He suggested taking an excursion to the Everglades, and Victoria agreed, just to avoid sitting in the room alone with her thoughts. They drove up the winding roads, admired the views, took photos at observation points. The guide talked about the local nature and history. Owen held Victoria's hand and whispered compliments, and she looked at the ravine beside the road and thought, how easy would it be to push someone down? How easy to stage an accident. What are you thinking about? Owen asked, noticing her gaze. About how high up we've climbed. Victoria answered, forcing a smile. A little scary. Don't be afraid. I'm here. I won't let you fall. Owen put his arm around her shoulders. These words made Victoria even more anxious. That evening, when they returned to the hotel, Victoria received a message from Mason. Got first results. Call when you can. Talk calmly. She waited until Owen fell asleep and went out on the balcony. The night ocean roared below. Wind tousled her hair. Victoria dialed the investigators. Number. Speaking. Mason answered. It's me. What did you find out? A lot of interesting things. The investigator's voice was calm. Professional. I'll start in order. 15 years ago, your husband lived in suburban Chicago in Riverside. A private house. 2-story. I pulled up the county assessor's documents from that period. In the property records, the house had a basement of 12 square meters. And here's what, a year and a half after Margaret Sullivan's disappearance, your husband filed an application with the assessor's office to exclude the basement from the property records. He stated the reason. The basement lost functionality. The space was sealed. Sealed. Victoria repeated. That's what the documents say. I went to that suburb, talked to neighbors, those who've lived there a long time remember. Owen Sullivan. They remember his wife, Margaret, too. Young, pretty, quiet girl, worked in a store. Neighbors say that on the day of her disappearance, they heard a loud argument in the Sullivan house. Both were shouting. Then silence. Victoria gripped the phone tighter. Next, Mason said, the neighbors told the following. After that day, Owen didn't leave the house for several days. The windows were closed, curtains drawn, and then strange things started. He began taking out some trash at night, bags, boxes. Several times he brought gravel and sand to the property. When a neighbor asked what he was doing, Owen answered, renovating the basement. The old foundation crumbled. Had to redo everything. My God, Victoria whispered. That's not all. I checked Border Service archives. Margaret Sullivan never crossed the border after her disappearance. Checked. Bank operations. All her accounts frozen. From that very day. Last transaction. Buying groceries at a store, 3 hours. Before the presumed time of disappearance, her cell phone went silent that same night. Never came back online. Victoria leaned against the balcony railing. Her legs were giving way. Do you think he killed her? I believe that with very high probability. Margaret Sullivan was killed by her husband and her body was buried in the house's basement. Then he covered it with gravel and sand and poured concrete over the floor to hide evidence. A year and a half later, he sold the house and moved. Sold it. To whom? To a certain Nathan Miller, 52 years old, entrepreneur. Bought the house significantly below market price. I already contacted him. He agrees to let specialists in to examine the basement if there's official permission from investigative authorities. So, we need to go to the police. Yes, but first I'll gather all documents and evidence. So investigators have no reason to refuse opening a case. I need 3 to 4 more days. When are you returning to Chicago? In 6 days. Perfect. As soon as you fly in, contact me immediately. We'll go to the police department. Together, I'll give them all materials. They'll make a decision about opening the basement floor. If there really is a body there, your husband will be arrested. Victoria covered her face with her hand. All this was like a nightmare. Mr. Mason, what if they don't find anything there? Then we'll have serious problems with evidence. Mason answered honestly, but there are enough circumstantial evidence to start an investigation. A person's disappearance, strange behavior by the spouse, suspicious construction, work, sale of the house at an undervalued price. All this indicates an attempt to conceal a crime. Okay, I'll wait until returning to Chicago. Thank you. Take care of yourself, Ms. Reynolds. The conversation ended. Victoria stood on the balcony and looked into the darkness. Owen killed his first wife, buried her in the basement under a pile of sand and gravel, poured concrete over the top, hid it for 15 years, and then decided to marry again. A rich heiress. Why? For money? Or does he have some other plan? She remembered how Owen insisted on a joint account, how he suggested granting him power of attorney to manage assets. Then it seemed like care. Now, calculation. Victoria returned to the room. Owen was sleeping, arms spread out. She lay down beside him, but couldn't sleep. She lay and thought about Margaret. What was she like? What did she dream about? Did she love Owen? And what happened that night 15 years ago? Why did he kill her in the morning? Owen woke up in an excellent mood. Good morning, beautiful. Today we're going wine tasting. I already ordered a taxi. Get ready. Victoria nodded and went to the shower. Water flowed over her body and she thought how to behave next. The remaining days in Miami seemed like an eternity. She wanted to immediately return to Chicago, go to the police, tell everything. But Mason asked to wait. Evidence was needed. Documents were needed. The wine tasting passed as if in a fog. Owen tried different varieties, discussed bouquets and aging with the sommelier. Victoria pretended to listen, but her thoughts were far away. She looked at Owen's hands and thought, with these hands, he killed Margaret. With these hands, he mixed concrete to hide the body. Do you like this wine? Owen asked, offering her a glass. Yes, very much. Victoria Leith. That evening, they dined in a restaurant. On the ocean shore, live music played. Waiters served exquisite dishes. Owen ordered champagne. To us, he said, raising his glass. To our love, to our future. Victoria clinked glasses with him and took a sip. The champagne was sweet. You know, Vic, Owen said thoughtfully, I'm so happy we're together. You changed my life. Gave me what I'd been looking for so long. And what's that? Victoria asked. Family. Stability. Love. Owen took her hand. Before you, I had nothing. Just emptiness. Victoria looked at him and understood. He was lying. Every word was a lie. He had a wife. He had a family, but he destroyed it. And now, he was building a new life on the bones of the past. Did you have serious relationships? Before, she carefully asked. Owen's face became hard for a moment, but he quickly pulled himself together. No, there were casual relationships, but nothing serious. You're the first I can call true love. Lie. Brazen. Cynical lie. Victoria bit her lip to keep from screaming. She wanted to throw the truth in his face, wanted to say, I know. About Margaret. I know what you did. I know you're a murderer. But instead, she smiled. I love you, too. Owen beamed and kissed her hand. The remaining days in Miami, Victoria held on with her last strength. She counted the hours until departure. Every night, she received new messages from Mason with investigation details. The investigator worked quickly and methodically. He found witnesses, pulled up old documents, requêtes d'archives. The picture was becoming clearer. Finally, the day of departure arrived. They packed their things, called a taxi, to the airport. On the plane, Owen leafed through a magazine and told her something. But Victoria wasn't listening. She thought that in a few hours her life would turn upside down again. When they landed in Chicago, Victoria said, Owen, I need to stop by the office. Urgent matters have piled up. He frowned. Now, we just landed. It's important. Partners called, asked to urgently sign documents. I'll be quick, and you go home. Unpack. Owen hesitated, but then nodded. Okay, just don't be late. They said goodbye at the airport exit. Owen left in a taxi home, and Victoria dialed Mason's number. I'm in Chicago. Shall we meet? Yes. Come to the coffee shop on Michigan Avenue that I sent you in the message. I'll be waiting. Victoria arrived 40 minutes later. Mason was sitting at a table in the corner. A man about 40, tall, pleasant-looking, with a short haircut. In front of him lay a thick folder with documents. Ms. Reynolds. He stood and extended his hand. Yes. She shook it and sat across from him. Here. Mason placed the folder in front of her. Everything I managed to collect over these days. Assessor's office documents, witness testimony, bank statements, border service data. There's everything here for the investigation to decide to open a case. Victoria opened the folder and began leafing through photocopies of documents, photographs, printouts of testimony, everything systematized, numbered, formatted. Tomorrow morning we go to the Chicago Police Department, Mason said. I arranged with Detective Warren. He specializes in serious crimes, experienced, principled. If anyone can see this case through to the end, it's him. What should I tell my husband? Victoria asked. He'll ask where I am. Say you have a business meeting, negotiations with partners, anything. The main thing, don't arouse suspicion. Victoria nodded. She understood. Tomorrow would begin something that could no longer be stopped. Victoria returned home late in the evening. Owen met her with a displeased face. Where were you? I was worried. I called 10 times. You didn't pick up. Sorry. Victoria kicked off her shoes and went into the living room. Negotiations dragged on. Phone was on silent mode. Owen came closer, peering into her face. You look strange. Did something happen? Just tired. Long day. She turned away, not wanting to meet his gaze. Owen put his arm around her shoulders, and Victoria barely restrained herself from flinching. Okay, go rest. I made dinner. She nodded and went to the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the bed, and sighed deeply. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow she'd go to the police department and tell them about her suspicions. If Mason was right and Margaret's body really was in that house's basement, Owen would be arrested. And if not, Victoria went to the shower. Under the streams of hot water, she replayed tomorrow in her head again and again. What would she tell the detective? How would she explain why she'd been silent so long? Would they believe her? Then they had dinner together, and Victoria, citing a headache, quickly went to sleep. But she could only fall asleep in the early morning, falling into a restless sleep. In the morning, Owen woke up earlier and left on business. Victoria waited until the door closed behind him, quickly got dressed, and called a taxi. Mason was waiting for her at the police department building. Ready? He asked. No, Victoria admitted honestly. But there's no other way. They passed through the metal detector, went up to the third floor. Mason knocked on the door of an office with a name plate. Detective A. Warren. Come in. Sounded from inside. Detective Warren turned out to be a man, about 50, with a professionally sharp gaze, gray at the temples, wrinkles on his forehead, a man who'd seen much. Derek brought the citizen, he asked, nodding to Mason. Yes, Victoria Reynolds. The case I told you about. Warren pointed to chairs in front of the desk. Sit down. Tell me. Victoria started from the very beginning, told about the call from the marriage bureau, about learning of Owen's existing marriage, about the missing Margaret. She spoke haltingly, getting confused in dates, but Warren listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Mason placed the thick folder on the desk. Detective Warren, here's everything I managed to collect. Assessor's office, documents, witness testimony, bank statements. The picture is unambiguous. Warren opened the folder and began studying the contents. He read slowly, carefully, making notes. In the margins, Victoria sat and waited patiently. Each second stretched into eternity. Finally, the detective set aside the last document and leaned back in his chair. The situation is indeed suspicious. Wife's disappearance, strange behavior by the husband, construction work in the basement, urgent sale of the house at an undervalued price. Everything points to an attempt to conceal a crime. So, you'll open a case? Victoria asked. First, I need to conduct a check. According to Criminal Procedure Code requirements, Warren explained, this will take several days. I need to interview witnesses, pull up archives, request additional documents. If signs of a crime are confirmed, I'll make a decision to open the basement floor. How long will this take? A week, maximum 10 days. Ms. Reynolds, you must understand. Are you sure you want to go all the way? Victoria looked at him firmly. I'm sure. I need to know the truth. Warren nodded. Good. Then let's begin. Derek, leave all materials with me. Ms. Reynolds, I'll ask you to write an official statement about the suspected crime, in detail, with all particulars. Victoria took a pen and paper. She wrote for a long time, trying not to miss a single detail. Told about the call from the marriage bureau, about the hidden marriage, about Margaret's disappearance, about how Owen never talked about his past and forbade asking questions, about oddities in his behavior. When she finished, she handed the statement to Warren. He ran his eyes over the text and nodded. Accepted. Now I have grounds for conducting a check. I'll contact you as soon as there are results. And for now, behave naturally. Don't show your husband that something's wrong. Victoria and Mason left the office. On the street, she felt the tension release. A little. Thank you, Mr. Mason, for everything. Too early to thank, Mason answered. The hardest part is ahead. Hold on, and if anything, call anytime. They said goodbye. Victoria caught a taxi and headed at home. On the way, Owen called. Where are you? His voice was tense. Heading home. Was at the notary. Processing business. Documents. Why didn't you warn me? I forgot. Sorry. Silence on the other end. Then Owen said, Okay, see you at home. Victoria hung up. Anxiety wouldn't leave. Her Owen clearly suspected something. She needed to be more careful. The next day was passed in agonizing. Waiting. Victoria tried to behave as usual, but it was getting harder. Owen watched her closely, asked questions, checked her phone. Several times she caught his gaze. Cold. Studying. On the fifth day, Warren called. Ms. Reynolds. The check is complete. Witnesses confirmed testimony. Documents correspond to reality. I've decided to conduct investigative actions. Day after tomorrow at 10. 0 inches. The morning. We'll open the floor in the basement of the house that belonged to your husband. You're not required to attend, but you have the right. I'll be there, Victoria said. Immediately. Then we'll meet on site. I'll send you the address and a message. Victoria lowered the phone. Day after tomorrow. In 2 days she'd know the truth. On the appointed day, Victoria told Owen she was leaving on a business trip for 2 days. He frowned, but didn't object. She took a small bag, got in a taxi, and headed to Riverside, the house where Owen and Margaret lived. 15 years ago, turned out to be a small, 2-story structure on a quiet street. The new owner, Nathan Miller, stood by, the gate nervously smoking. 2 police department service vehicles were parked nearby. Warren came out of the house, saw Victoria, and nodded. You came. We'll start now. Inside the house, a crew was already working. Specialists in work clothes prepared tools. Warren led Victoria into the house. There was a storage-type room from which there used to be an entrance to the basement. According to assessor's office documents, from 15 years ago, there was a regular basement here, the detective explained. Then your husband filed an application for sealing. The floor was covered and poured with a thick layer of concrete. We'll start opening from the central part. Workers brought jackhammers. The roar filled the room. The concrete crumbled. Slowly, layer by layer. Victoria stood by the wall and watched. As gray dust rose into the air, an hour passed. Then another. The concrete slab was getting thinner. Finally, one of the workers stopped and called Warren. Detective Warren, there's something here. The detective came over, squatted down. Victoria stepped closer, though fear paralyzed her movements. Under the layer of concrete appeared soil. Over the next 3 hours, the crew carried soil out in buckets to the yard. Then one of the workers hit fabric. Dark, decayed, but distinguishable. Continue more carefully, Warren ordered. Workers took up shovels. They dug, cautiously, removing earth in layers. And then appeared something that made Victoria recoil. Bones, human remains and bones wrapped in decayed remnants of fabric. Stop work, Warren commanded. Call the medical examiners. This is a crime scene. Victoria left the basement, leaning on the wall. Her legs wouldn't hold her. Her head was spinning. She felt nauseous from what she'd seen. She sat on the porch steps and covered her face with her hands. So it was true. Margaret was dead. Owen killed her and buried her here. Warren came out a few minutes later. Ms. Reynolds, you'd better leave. The forensics team will work here for several hours. I'll contact you when I get results. Is it her? Victoria whispered. Margaret, I can't say for certain yet, but according to preliminary data, probably. Victoria nodded and stood. Nathan Miller watched her with a sympathetic look. I didn't know, he said quietly. When I bought the house, I had no idea such a thing was here. Sullivan said he was urgently moving to another city. Sold it cheap. I thought he just needed quick money. You're not to blame, Victoria answered. She left back to Chicago. The whole way she sat staring out the window. One thought kept spinning in her head. I lived with a murderer, slept with him, kissed him, trusted him. And all this time he knew that under the floor of the house lay the body of his first wife. That evening Warren called. Preliminary forensics results are ready. The remains belong to a woman, aged 22. 25. Death occurred as a result of cervical, vertebrae fracture. Multiple rib fractures were also discovered, indicating a struggle. A purse with documents in the name of Margaret Sullivan and her cell phone were found there as well. So, it's definitely her, yes. No doubt, Ms. Reynolds. I've opened a criminal case for murder. Tomorrow morning we'll detain your husband. Victoria felt everything inside clench. He's at home now. Thinks I'm on a business trip. Good. We'll take him tomorrow. You'd better not appear at home until the rest. Do you have somewhere to spend the night? Yes, I do. Excellent. I'll contact you as soon as everything's done. Victoria called Simon. He immediately agreed to come get her. Everything will be fine. Vic, he said, hugging her, the worst is behind you. She shook her head. No, the worst is just beginning. They went to Simon's place. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. Modest but cozy. Simon made tea. Sat Victoria on the couch. Tell me what happened there. And she told him about opening the floor, about the remains, about the forensics. Simon listened silently, only occasionally nodding. So, he really is a murderer, he finally said. I always felt something was off about him, but I didn't think it was that bad. Me neither, Victoria whispered. I loved him. Simon wanted children with him, a family, and he was just using me. Simon took her hand. This isn't your fault. You couldn't have known. Victoria pressed against his shoulder and cried. For the first time in all these days, she allowed herself weakness. Simon silently stroked her hair, saying nothing, just was there. In the morning, Warren called. All done. Sullivan was detained at O'Hare Airport. Tried to fly to Turkey. He tried to flee. Yes. Apparently realized he'd been found out. But we made it in time. Now, he's in the county jail. Interrogation start tomorrow. Ms. Reynolds, you'll need to give testimony. When can you come? Today. Right now. She arrived at the police department an hour later. Warren led her into an interrogation room. The detective recorded, asked clarifying questions. Thank you, Warren said when they finished. Now we have the complete picture. Your husband, or rather the man who passed himself off as your husband, is in custody. The marriage you entered will be annulled by the county clerk in the near future, since it was contracted with an already married person and is null and void. What will happen to him? To Owen, he faces 8 to 15 years imprisonment, depending on how the trial goes. If he fully admits guilt, they might reduce the sentence. If not, they'll give the maximum. Victoria left the building. Outside the sun was shining. People hurried about their business. Life went on, and her own life had just collapsed, and now she had to rebuild it anew. Simon was waiting for her by the car. Well, it's over, Victoria answered. Owen's been arrested. Investigation is underway. Simon hugged her. Now you're safe. That's what matters. They drove back. Victoria looked out the window and thought about Margaret, the girl who once loved Owen, married him, dreamed of the future, and died in the basement of her own home. No one searched for her. No one knew the truth. 15 years she lay under concrete, forgotten by everyone. Now justice would prevail. Owen would answer for his crime, and Victoria would gain freedom. 3 days had passed since Owen's arrest. Victoria all this time lived at Simon's, not daring to return to her own apartment. There were too many memories there, too many things that reminded her of the man who turned out to be a murderer. Warren regularly called and reported on the progress of the investigation. Forensics finally confirmed the remains belonged to Margaret Sullivan. Age, gender, all data matched. The phone found in the purse belonged to her. Victoria listened to these details and felt how everything inside froze. Margaret knew. She feared her husband, but couldn't leave in time. Sullivan refuses to give testimony. Warren reported on the fourth day. Demands a lawyer. We provided him with a court-appointed defender. Tomorrow will be the first interrogation, and there's a procedural necessity. You'll need to officially identify him as the man you entered marriage with. This'll take a few minutes. Victoria agreed. The next day, she came to the police department. Warren led her to an identification room. It was a small room with one-way mirror glass, behind which stood 5 men of approximately the same age and build. What number is the man you registered marriage with? The detective asked. Victoria looked at the men. Owen stood third. He looked straight ahead. Face was stony, without emotion. Third, she said quietly. Are you sure? Yes. Warren made a note in the protocol. The identification was complete. Victoria left the room, feeling her legs giving way. She'd seen Owen for only a few seconds, but that was enough for all the memories to flood back. Ms. Reynolds, sit down. Warren seated her in a chair in the corridor. Are you feeling ill? No, I'm fine. Just hard. I understand. Now the interrogation will begin. You can leave or stay. The interrogation recording will be added to the case materials. I'll stay. Victoria decided. I want to hear what he says. Warren nodded and led her to an adjacent room. There was a monitor showing the image from the interrogation room. Owen sat at a table. Next to him, a lawyer, a man about 50 in a strict suit. Warren entered the frame and sat across from them. Owen Sullivan, you've been charged under Illinois Criminal Code. First degree murder. Do you plead guilty? Owen was silent. The lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something. Owen shook his head. My client refuses to give testimony until familiarization with all case materials, the lawyer announced. Fine. Warren opened a folder. Then I'll announce the available evidence. On May 15th, 2010, your spouse Margaret Sullivan disappeared. That day neighbors heard a loud argument in your house. After that, you didn't leave the house for several days and then began conducting construction work in the basement. Witnesses claim you took out construction debris at night and brought in sand, gravel, and concrete. Owen sat motionless, looking at the table. A year and a half later, you filed an application with the assessor's office to exclude the basement from theft property records, indicating the space was sealed. 3 months later, you sold the house at a price significantly below market value. All this time, no one searched for Margaret Sullivan. She had no other relatives. You didn't officially file a report about her disappearance. I thought she went to her friends. Owen suddenly said hoarsely. The lawyer jerked, trying to stop him, but Owen continued. We had a fight. She screamed that she was leaving. I went to work. When I came back, she wasn't there. I thought she went to her friends and would cool down. Then time passed. I didn't search. Decided it was better that way for both of us. So, you claim you have no connection to her disappearance. Warren clarified. Yes, I didn't kill Margaret. Then explain why her remains were found in your house's basement under a layer of concrete that you yourself poured. Owen fell silent. His face paled. I don't know how they ended up there. Sullivan, don't complicate your situation. Warren said firmly. We have all the evidence. Witness, testimony, documents, forensics. The deceased had multiple fractures, broken neck. This isn't an accident. This is murder. And you're the only one who could have committed it. Owen lowered his head. I want to talk with my lawyer alone. Talk. Warren stood. I'll give you an hour to confer. Then, we'll continue. The image on the monitor went dark. Victoria sat, unable to move. Owen was lying. Even now, when cornered with evidence, he continued to dodge. Warren came out of the interrogation room and approached Victoria. Did you see? Yes. He's denying everything. Typical reaction. But we'll break him. Sooner or later. He'll confess. Too much evidence against him. An hour later, the interrogation resumed. This time, Owen looked dejected. The lawyer sat next to him with a stone face. Sullivan, are you ready to give testimony? Warren asked. Owen nodded. Yes, I'll tell the truth. Margaret and I had a fight that evening. She accused me of earning too little, of not being able to provide for her properly, screamed that she regretted marrying me. I couldn't take it. I grabbed her by the shoulders, wanted to stop her. We pushed each other. She fell, hit her head on the edge of the table. I didn't want to kill her. It was an accident. An accident, Warren repeated. She has a broken neck and 5 broken ribs. Forensics determined that the neck fractures were inflicted by directed force, not a fall. Owen covered his face with his hands. Okay, I strangled her when she fell. I got scared. Thought she'd tell the police everything. That they'd put me away. I panicked, grabbed her by the neck and pushed her down, pressed on her neck. Maybe broke the vertebra. She stopped breathing. I realized what I'd done, but it was too late. The body was already lifeless. Victoria clamped her mouth with her hand to keep from screaming. He confessed. He killed Margaret with his own hands. What did you do next? Warren continued. I took the body down to the basement, wrapped it in old sheets, buried it, covered it with sand and gravel, then poured concrete over the floor. Thought no one would ever know. A year and a half later, I sold the house and left, started a new life, and then decided to marry again. Owen raised his head. Something evil flashed in his eyes. Yes, I met Victoria. She's rich, beautiful, trusting, the perfect victim. I was going to get access to her money. And then, he broke off. And then what? Warren asked firmly. Nothing. Just live on, or get rid of her like your first wife. Owen was silent. Answer the question. I didn't plan anything like that. Owen said through clenched teeth. I just wanted money, nothing more. Warren looked at the interrogated man. Sullivan, your testimony has been recorded. It will be used in court. You admitted guilt in the murder of Margaret. Sullivan, this is a mitigating circumstance, but doesn't cancel punishment. You face 8 to 15 years imprisonment. Owen dropped his head on his hands. The lawyer wrote something in a notepad. The interrogation ended. Victoria left the building. Her legs carried her on their own. She didn't realize where she was going. Simon caught up with her after a few meters. Vic, stop. Where are you going? She turned around. Her face was wet with tears. He confessed. Simon, he killed her, strangled her with his bare hands, and then buried her in the basement like trash. Simon hugged her. I understand. It's horrible, but now it's over. He won't hurt anyone else. They returned to the car. Victoria sat in the passenger seat and closed her eyes. It seemed to her that the whole world was collapsing. The next day, Linda Foster from the Marriage Bureau called. Ms. Reynolds, I need to inform you. Officially, your marriage with Owen Sullivan has been annulled. It was declared null and void from the moment of registration since Sullivan was in another marriage, not dissolved at the time of your wedding. All records in the registry have been deleted. Thank you, Victoria whispered. Officially, this page of your life is closed. Victoria hung up. Officially, legally, but the wound in her soul would remain for a long time. 3 weeks passed. Owen was transferred to county jail, awaiting trial. The investigation gathered all evidence, prepared the indictment. The case was transferred to court. Victoria returned to her apartment. First thing, she threw out all of Owen's things, clothes, documents, photographs, everything that reminded her of him. Then she rearranged furniture, bought new pieces, tried to erase his presence from her life. Simon came every day, helped, supported, just was there. He didn't say extra words, didn't demand anything in return, just gave her his presence. Thank you, Victoria said one evening. Without you, I wouldn't have made it. I'll always be here. Simon answered, however long it takes. I'll wait until you're ready to live. Again, Victoria looked at him. This man had loved her for so many years, silently, without imposing, remained a friend. And when she felt bad, he was the first who came to help. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust someone again, she admitted. Don't rush. Everything in its time. Victoria nodded. Ahead was the trial. Ahead was a long road to recovery. But she knew she'd make it because there was a person beside her who would never betray her. The trial was scheduled for late autumn. During this time, Victoria gradually returned to normal life, work, meetings with partners, business negotiations. She immersed herself in affairs, headfirst, trying not to think about the upcoming trial. But at night, she was tormented by nightmares. She saw Margaret, her remains, Owen's hands on her neck. She'd wake up in a cold sweat, grab her phone, and look at the time. 3:00 in the morning. 4:00. 5:00. Sleep wouldn't return. Simon came every evening. Sometimes they just sat in silence, drank tea, looked out the window. Sometimes they talked about work, books, the weather, about anything, just not about Owen. Victoria valued this silent presence. Simon didn't pressure, didn't demand answers to questions she couldn't yet ask herself. A week before the trial, Warren called. Ms. Reynolds, the trial will begin Monday, November 10th, at 10:00 in the morning. Cook County Circuit Court, courtroom number 3. Yes, Victoria answered. I'll be there. Good. Come early. About 20 minutes ahead. The trial is open. There may be journalists. Be prepared for that. Victoria hung up and looked at the calendar. November 10th. In 6 days, she'd see Owen for the last time. See him convicted for what he did. Simon learned about the trial date and immediately offered, I'll go with you. I don't want you to be there alone. Thank you. Victoria took his hand. I really need the support. The days dragged on painfully slowly. Victoria tried to work, but couldn't concentrate. Thoughts constantly returned to the upcoming trial. What would Owen say? Would he be repentant? Or would he continue dodging until the end? The night before the trial, she barely slept, tossed in bed, got up, walked around the apartment. At 5:00 in the morning, she gave up and made coffee, sat by the window and watched the dawn rise over the city. Gray sky, first rays of sun, awakening. Chicago, at 9:00 in the morning. Simon arrived. They drove to the courthouse in silence. Victoria looked out the car window and tried to calm down, but the anxiety wouldn't pass. Journalists really were crowding by the courthouse building. As soon as Victoria got out of the car, a barrage of questions hit her. Ms. Reynolds, did you know about your husband's past? How do you feel? What do you want to say to Sullivan? Simon shielded her and led her through the crowd. They entered the building, went up to the second floor. Detective Warren stood by the door of courtroom number 3. Ms. Reynolds, come in. The trial will begin in 10 minutes. They entered the courtroom, a small room with rows of benches for spectators, a table for the judge, places for the prosecutor and defense attorney. In the center stood a metal cage for the defendant, empty. Owen hadn't been brought in yet. Victoria sat in the first row. Simon settled beside her. The courtroom gradually filled with people. The prosecutor came, Owen's lawyer, the court secretary. Several journalists took the back rows. At exactly 10:00, Owen was led into the courtroom. He walked accompanied by 2 guards in handcuffs. He looked unwell, He surveyed the courtroom and stopped, his gaze on Victoria. For several seconds, their eyes met. In his gaze, there was no remorse, only cold emptiness. Victoria turned away. She felt physically ill from that look. All rise. Court is in session. These creetery announced. Everyone stood. The judge entered. Saturday at the table. Put on glasses. Please be seated. Hearing criminal case. Defendant Owen Sullivan is charged with committing a crime under Illinois Criminal Code, first-degree murder. Defendant stand. Do you understand the charge? Owen stood. Yes, I understand. Do you plead guilty? Owen paused. The lawyer whispered something to him, but he didn't listen. I plead guilty, he finally said dully. I killed Margaret Sullivan 15 years ago. A whisper ran through the courtroom. The judge struck the gavel. Silence in the courtroom. Defendant, describe in detail the circumstances under which the crime was committed. Owen began to tell. His voice was monotonous, without emotion. He described that night 15 years ago, the argument with Margaret, how she screamed at him, accused him of inability to provide for the family, how he snapped, grabbed her by the neck, pushed her down, squeezed, how she tried to break free, scratched his face, but he didn't let go, how her neck crunched, and she stopped breathing. Victoria listened and felt everything. Inside clenched with horror. Beside her, Simon took her hand and squeezed it tightly. She looked at him, gratefully. Owen continued, told how he took the body down to the basement, wrapped it in old sheets, buried it, covered it. How he poured concrete over the floor. How a year and a half later, he sold the house and left. How he started a new life, as if nothing had happened. And then you met Victoria Reynolds. The judge said, tell us about that. Owen looked at Victoria. Yes, I met her at a business dinner. Found out she owned a stake in a major business. Decided she was the perfect woman. Rich. Alone. I started courting her. She fell in love. Quickly. I thought I'd start a new life. Create a family. Victoria bit her lip. Listening to this was unbearable. I planned to marry her, Owen continued, but didn't account for the marriage. Bureau checking my documents. When they issued me a new passport 6 months ago, I didn't report the existing marriage. Thought there was no information about it left in the database. I was wrong. So you deliberately hid the fact of an existing marriage. The judge clarified. Yes, I knew that if I reported it, Margaret's disappearance might surface, and I couldn't allow that. Sullivan, do you regret what you did? Owen paused. I regret that I got caught. As for the rest, he shrugged. Margaret was to blame herself. She drove me to it. I didn't want to kill her, but she left. Me no choice. A whisper passed through the courtroom. Again, the judge frowned. Defendant, your words indicate lack of remorse. This will be taken into account when passing sentence. Sit down. Owen sat. His face was indifferent. The judge looked at the prosecutor. State prosecutor, your position. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, Defendant Sullivan committed a grave crime. He killed his spouse, hid the body. For 15 years led an ordinary life without feeling remorse. This speaks to his danger to society. I request a sentence of 15 years. Imprisonment in a state penitentiary. Defense, your position. Owen's lawyer rose. Your Honor, my client fully admitted guilt. The crime was committed in a state of affect caused by unlawful behavior of the victim. I ask you to consider this as a mitigating circumstance and assign punishment closer to the minimum limit of the sanction. The judge wrote something down and announced, the court withdraws for deliberation to pass sentence. Everyone stood. The judge left the courtroom. A recess began. Victoria went out into the corridor. Simon followed her. How are you? I don't know, she admitted. Listening to him was horrible. He doesn't regret it at all. For him, Margaret was just an obstacle that needed to be removed. He'll get what's coming, Simon said, firmly. The judge sees it. They waited an hour. Then the secretary announced the court was resuming. Everyone returned to the courtroom. The judge entered with a folder in her hands. All rise. Court is in session. Everyone stood. The judge sat, opened the folder. In the name of the state of Illinois, the Cook County Circuit Court, having considered the criminal case against Owen Sullivan, accused of committing a crime under Illinois Criminal Code, first-degree murder, has established the following. The judge began reading the sentence. Described the circumstances of the crime. Evidence. Witness testimony. Victoria listened half attentively. She was only interested in one thing. What sentence would Owen get? The court does not find a state of effect in the defendant's actions. The judge continued. The murder was committed as a result of a domestic conflict. However, the defendant's subsequent actions, hiding the body, lying to investigative authorities, attempting to start a new life with another woman for the purpose of financial gain, speak to the high degree of public danger of the individual. Remorse is absent. The court finds no mitigating circumstances except admission of guilt. Victoria held her breath. Based on the above, the court sentences to find Owen Sullivan guilty of committing the crime and assign him punishment in the form of 15 years, imprisonment to be served in a state penitentiary. The term of punishment shall be calculated from the day the sentence takes legal force. The sentence may be appealed within the legally established time frame. The judge struck the gavel. The trial was over. Owen stood in the cage with a stone face. He didn't look at Victoria, didn't look at anyone. The guards led him out of the courtroom. The door closed. Victoria sat, unable to move. 15 years. Owen would spend 15 years in prison. He was 37 now. When he got out, he'd be 52. Half his life lost. It's over, Simon said quietly. Now it's really over. They left the courthouse building. Journalists surrounded them again. But Victoria silently walked past. She didn't want to say anything. Didn't want to remember. In the car, she finally broke down, crying. Simon hugged her and just held her, saying nothing. Several months passed. Owen didn't appeal the sentence. He was sent to serve his punishment in a state penitentiary somewhere in downstate Illinois. Victoria never heard about him again. Life gradually fell into place. Work entered a familiar rhythm. Victoria again began meeting with friends, going to theaters, traveling. The wounds healed slowly but surely. Simon stayed close. He didn't talk about his feelings, didn't demand anything in return, just was. And one day, Victoria realized she couldn't imagine her life without him. It happened on a spring evening when they sat on her balcony, drinking wine. Simon was telling something funny about work, and Victoria was laughing, genuinely, from the heart. For the first time in a long time. Simon, she suddenly said, I want to ask you something. He looked at her. I'm listening. Why did you stay close? After everything that happened, why didn't you leave? Simon smiled. Because I love you. I've loved you since I was 17, and I can't do otherwise. But for so long, I didn't reciprocate. I chose someone else, made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake, Simon said, gently. You just walked your own path. And I waited, and I'll wait as long as it takes. Victoria looked at him. This man had loved her his whole life. Silently, patiently, devotedly. He was there during the worst days, supported her without demanding anything in return, and she suddenly understood she loved him, too, differently, not as passionately as Owen, quietly, deeply, reliably. Simon, she said quietly, I'm ready to try if you still want to. He silently took her hand and kissed it. Of course I do. They began dating. Slowly, cautiously. Victoria was learning to trust again, to open up again. Simon didn't rush her, went at her pace. They went to movies, walked in the park, dined in small cafes, ordinary, simple things that brought joy. A year later, Simon proposed to her without fanfare, without a big scene, just asked one evening, "Vic, marry me. I promise I'll always be here, that you'll never regret it." Victoria looked at him and smiled. Yes, they had a quiet wedding among close friends and relatives, without pomp, without extra guests, just a warm autumn day, a small restaurant, loved ones around them. Victoria was in a simple white dress, Simon in a light suit. They exchanged rings and vowed to be together in joy and sorrow. When the guests left, they sat together at a restaurant table and looked at each other holding hands. "You know," Victoria said thoughtfully, "I thought for a long time about what happened, about Owen, about Margaret, about all that nightmare, and I understood. Life saved me in time. If not for that call from the marriage bureau, I would never have learned the truth. And who knows how it all would have ended." "You're amazing," Simon said. "You made it through." "No," Victoria objected. "We made it through. You helped me. Without you, I couldn't have done it." Simon hugged her. "Now everything will only be good for you. I'll be here my whole life. I promise." Victoria pressed against him, and somewhere far away, behind prison walls, sat a man who tried to destroy her life. But he lost, and she won, found the strength to survive, rise up, and start over. And beside her was the one who always waited for her patiently, devotedly, to the end.